Hello and welcome to Chapter 9. We are moving out of looking at the context in which business takes place and are moving into a focus on the functional areas. And so the functional areas: marketing, management, accounting, finance. And we start with marketing. And this is a big chapter and a big week for us because there is a lot of material here. So hold on, I guess. Here we go. So marketing is really, you can read the definition here, and I'm sure you will. What I want to point out is marketing is not advertising. A lot of people, we say marketing and they think of advertising and they think the two are synonymous. Advertising is a very small subcomponent of marketing. Marketing is a much bigger idea. And the more effective and the better you are at marketing, the less important your advertising or your communication becomes. Because when you're doing a great job of identifying customer needs and creating an immense amount of customer value, then you don't find it incredibly difficult to move your products or your services. So think about marketing in a much more holistic way than just advertising. Don't get caught in that trap of thinking about advertising. And of course, it's so easy for us to do that because we see so much advertising. We're so aware of it that's where the conversation starts for most of us, but we want to think much bigger than that. So here's a nice bulleted list of the various things that go on in marketing. Identifying products and features and benefits, setting prices, target markets or groups of customers that you think you can create some real value for, creating awareness, which may be part of your marketing communication or your advertising approach, completing the purchase process, doing delivery, and then managing the customer relations on an ongoing or long-term basis. We often think that it's much easier to do repeat business than it is to create new customers all the time. So having a good customer relations or customer relation management program or process is a key idea. So here's a marketing concept. And I want to contrast this a little bit. We've had different eras in business. You'll hear people sometimes talk historically about the production area, where really the economy went from, basically sort of minimal goods available to the ability to do production as part of the Industrial Revolution. And there was really demand for almost all the products that could be produced because there were not a lot of offerings. There were not a lot of products available. And so the focus in business at that time was really scientific management, the production process, and sort of trying to optimize and create more. At some point, the economy sort of got flush with products. That is, there was a lot of choices for consumers now, and it became important to try to differentiate yourself by making your product more useful or more valuable than the other products. And so this is the point when marketing started to become much more important as an idea. It's hard to pinpoint an exact date or time when that happened, but it was probably sometime in the late 50s, early 60s, when basic consumer consumption was being satisfied by the production era, and now differentiation started to become more important. And so you can see here in the marketing concept or the marketing era, there's a lot more focus rather than just on producing, trying to figure out what customers need, developing products to meet those needs, getting the company focused on customers and creating customer value and benefits, and aligning product production with customer needs. And when you do that well, it's thought that you can be superior to your competition, and you'll likely enjoy a greater profitability. So that's the marketing concept. Marketing is, of course, like everything else we've studied, a huge idea. You can do a PhD in consumer behavior or marketing strategy or marketing communications. I mean, these are big areas to study and wrap our heads around. But here you can see that, we're thinking about target markets, identifying markets, segmenting, developing your marketing mix, and then consumer markets, industrial markets, and then different ways of segmenting: demographic, geographic, behavioral, and psychographic. And we're going to delve into all of these ideas a little bit. I just want to, caution you that there's also much more to study as you go along in your business career. So, segmentation is this idea that you can break down the market, or another way to think about it is you can build up a market. So you can look at, all of the potential customers that might exist, which literally might be all the businesses or all the individuals in the world, and you can then try to break them down into a group that you might try to target. Or you can identify a single customer that you might be able to provide benefits or value to, and then you could start thinking about, well, where are the other individuals that are like this person that I already do business with? Where are they at? How can I reach them? So you can think about this as either breaking down or building up a group of customers that are similar in nature that you can do business with. And so you'll hear some different terms thrown around. B2B is business to business. So you could be, let's say that you were an accountant and you were trying to create a business model, and you might focus on small to medium-sized firms that need to upgrade their accounting system. And you might become an expert in sort of these accounting system migrations, because no business is going to do that very often, and so they're not going to know how to do it themselves. But every small to medium-sized business that's growing is going to have that need at some point, and you could sort of specialize in helping a business solve that problem. That's a B2B sort of business opportunity. And then other things, business to consumer, and we're more familiar with business to consumer because we're all individual consumers, and we've engaged in a lot of business transactions over our lifetime in a business to consumer kind of way. Other ways you could think about markets: demographics. You could focus on the estate planning needs of people that are nearing retirement. So you're really breaking down in that situation by kind of by age. You could focus on different demographics. So you could focus on a teenage market. You could focus on a stay-at-home mom market. You could focus on, you name it, you could come up with it. Geographic is really focusing by area. So maybe you want to expand a restaurant chain, and you realize that the states that are experiencing the most rapid growth are the Mountain West states. So the Utahs, the Nevadas, the Colorados, as the Rust Belt sort of depopulates, people are finding the East Coast and the West Coast very attractive, but somewhat crowded. And so the Mountain West states have been experiencing population growth. So that can create all kinds of opportunities for new restaurants, new convenience stores. If you're a builder, there's more construction demand and needs for housing. So that's a way to break down or focus on a market based on geography. Behavioral characteristics. So, you can focus or you can identify consumers that behave in a certain way. So maybe you will focus on the people that are into sports and athletics and want to work out a lot, because working out is kind of a behavioral type thing. You might segment along those lines and then try to figure out where those people are congregated, not necessarily physically, but the types of things that those consumers do and how you might reach them. What is it they read? What is it they listen to? What is it they watch? and then what are their needs and what kind of products can we create so that we can satisfy or deliver value to them. And then psychographics is rather than based on behavior, it's thinking models. And so you could divide the economy or the consumers into right-leaning politically or left-leaning politically, or any other way or any other thinking model. Those people who attend religious services on a regular basis, these are all psychographic delineations, and you might be able to accumulate a market with a psychographic kind of segmentation. When we think about the marketing mix, and this is a strategy idea, one of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to align the product with its features and benefits and the value that it creates with the price, how you promote it, and then how you deliver it to the consumer, so that all of these things align in a way to make a cohesive delivery or cohesive story to the end consumer, so that they can sort of think about your product in a particular way. It's kind of hard for me to describe this, but you wouldn't, for example, if you had a very high-end product, let's say you're selling Rolex watches, you probably aren't going to try to deliver those through the Walmart distribution retail outlets. I mean, it's an incohesive idea, nor would you necessarily try to promote those products on the Bart Simpson show. It just wouldn't make any sense. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to think about your product, the price, the promotion, and the delivery process, the place, in a way that you can integrate all of these things together to make sort of a strategic delivery of your marketing mix. And you can see that there's very little advertising there. That's a whole lot of other things that come into play. Research is the idea that in order to create customer value and deliver superior customer benefits, you need to know a lot about your customer. So you can collect both primary and secondary data. Primary data is where you collect the data yourself. Secondary data is when you acquire it from somewhere else. So when I mentioned that, population growth in the Mountain West states was greater than average, that's secondary data that's put together by the U.S. government, basically census data. And so there's a lot of secondary data sources that we can collect to give us a sense of a consumer or a segment of the market or a series of consumers. But then we may need to go further and collect some primary data. This is where we do surveys, or we do focus groups, or we do anthropological studies, which is basically we watch consumers and how they use particular products to try to gain more information so that we can make our offerings or our products even more relevant. So more ideas about marketing research. So surveys, and we've all seen these, right? There's the little survey cards at the restaurant where you have a little pencil and you fill them out, or maybe a more significant one would be the STARS method on product reviews for places like Amazon or anybody else who's now selling stuff online. You can interview people, to find out, did they like the product? Did they not like the product? How often do they use the product? Would they recommend the product to other people? All of these different things. Focus groups is when you get people together and you ask them questions. This is a little bit more useful when your problem is a little more complex and you're just beginning to try to understand your problem, because you can ask more open-ended questions and you're going to get more open-ended answers. And then anthropological, which, if I remember correctly, this is not in our reading, but I've added here. This is where you study customers and how they use your product. And one of the best examples that I can remember from when I was in school and studying these things was the Honda auto manufacturers would spend some time driving around with customers And this is where they realized that one of the problems people had, particularly grocery shoppers, was all the grocery bags falling over in the back of the minivan. And so they realized this was a problem, and so they started creating hooks or attachment mechanisms to hold grocery bags up. And they didn't, nobody told them that they needed these things. They just rode around with enough customers to realize that, hey, look, this is a problem that's presenting itself frequently, and we can design a solution to this. And if we do that, that's going to make our minivan more attractive or have more benefits than the competing minivan. And so that's an idea of anthropological studies. Branding is this idea of trying to create your product, trying to get it so that it occupies a certain mental space in the consumer's mind. I kind of think that branding is one of those things that's maybe a bit overdone right now. You'll see these things even where people will talk about personal branding and how you should be trying to, create your own brand image of yourself. This is created by this idea of branding is sort of part of your marketing mix. So your promotion, your place, your price, your product, and you can do things like private branding. We all, if you go to the grocery store, every grocery store chain has sort of its private label brand, and then you're probably familiar with generic products also. The manufacturer can brand things, and all of this is designed to try to create brand equity or brand loyalty. And it's partly done with the communication message, it's partly done with the pricing, it's partly done with the place or the delivery system, the packaging, the label. All of this stuff integrates together to try to create a brand image. And you might think about some of the brands that you're really familiar with, whether it be Nike with their Just Do It, or Coach bags, or any one of the the car manufacturers, whether it be Mazda with the Zoom Zoom, or whatever the brand is, they're trying to create a different image that sits and stays or sticks in the consumer's mind. Pricing. So again, part of the marketing mix, a lot of strategies here. So you can try to price your product very high to skim and get high profits from the early adopters. You can try to price low so that you can get a lot of market share, with the idea being that once the market is well established and the volume is created, your manufacturing costs will come down, and with a large share, you'll eventually enjoy significant profitability. You can do a cost-based pricing, so you can just figure out, well, it cost us this much to make it, and so we need to mark it up a certain amount in order to have the desired profit that we're after. You can figure out what it is your targeted market, the segment that you're after, what it is they can afford to pay. And then you can work backwards from that to figure out what it is you can manufacture, or what features and benefits you can provide for that price. There's the whole odd even pricing thing, the $6.99 versus $7. There's mixed psychological evidence about whether or not that works. There are some psychological studies that say if you price something at 99 cents instead of $1, that it will make a difference. But I will counter that by just asking how many of you leave the penny behind when you make the convenience store purchase for 99 cents. Do you wait around for the penny, or do you just move along on your way? And so be careful with that idea. There is some evidence that the odd to even pricing, or the mismatch pricing, the 99 cents, the 95 cents, whatever it was originally created to force cashiers to open the cash registers to give change, which would prevent even numbered bills or large sums of money disappearing into the clerk's pocket. So there's a lot of there's a lot of varied ideas on this odd even pricing strategy. Prestige pricing, which is this idea that I'm just going to make something more expensive to signal some kind of value. This is quite common. Imagine you're going to pick up a bottle of red wine for dinner with a special someone. You're probably not going to go with the cheapest bottle, even if you know nothing about which one is the better one or which one is, more award-winning or has better flavor, tastes, or whatever it is you're after. And so sometimes price can be a signal of value, particularly when it's hard to figure out what the good products are from the not so good products. So here's a slide on place or distribution. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. You can be a producer that sells directly to consumers. You can be a producer that sells to retailers to consumers, or a lot of products go from a producer to a wholesaler to a retailer to a consumer. So imagine you make frozen goods. They generally go to a warehouse where they're kept frozen, a wholesaler who then distributes them to a retailer, say a Kroger's or a Winco, and then they are sold to a consumer. And so your distribution strategy will vary depending upon the nature of your product. If your product has a very high profit margin and they're not sold in great volume, you may be able to go directly to the consumer. But as the margin shrinks and the volume goes up, then you usually need somebody to serve the wholesale or retail functions, because the chain won't work very well without it. Imagine if every frozen foods manufacturer tried to sell directly to the consumer. It just seems difficult. So distribution, a lot of different ideas here. Physical distribution, storage warehouses, distribution centers, whether or not you need to do materials handling or improvements or adjustments. These are things like bulk breaking or building up different series of units of products. And then just-in-time production. These were all ideas that you might think about in the distribution process. I was trying to think of some distribution centers around the Eugene Springfield area. Let's see, on Seneca, there's a couple of there's at least one cold storage facility. If you look in the industrial areas, certainly the Bi-Mart store chain has a series of warehouses and distribution centers. Just a whole variety of these types of things take place all over in the economy. So begin to sort of pay attention to how those work and think about the products that you consume. What kind of a channel do they flow through? So here's that channel, by the way, that distribution channel. Sometimes people will talk about, we use the place nomenclature because place fits in nicely with the 4 P's in the marketing mix, but that place is really the distribution channel or the supply chain. And so the supply chain can be, the supplier, the manufacturer, the warehouse, the retail outlet to the consumer, or the channel can be shorter. And certainly we've seen a lot of channel disruption as a result of e-commerce and the expansion of the web and whatnot. And so you can buy products differently than the way they used to be purchased. So an example, it used to be that you almost always had to get your groceries from either the grocery store or from the farm. And now you can you can buy directly from different kinds of businesses that deliver kind of finished meals to you. And I'm thinking of the Blue Apron, and there's a whole series of other companies along that nature. That is supply chain disruption happening where the way in which products are getting to consumers is being reoriented or restructured because it can be done in a different way. And so it's interesting to watch these things happen. I think we'll see more supply chain disruption. Certainly Amazon is a supply chain disruptor, originally starting in the books market and basically decimating the independent or bookstore chains. And also you could think about video. It used to be that we all got all of our television, or the great majority of it, from cable, but now you've got Netflix, Hulu, and soon to have many more streaming options. And so these are disruptions in the supply chain, and they are damaging to many businesses, but they also create new opportunities in the economy as well. So the value chain, this is an important idea. There are features and benefits and attributes of your product that a consumer finds very valuable, and those are the things that they're willing to pay for. Generally, the quality, the service, the price. And then there are things that are, non-value added. And maybe the best way to think about this is something as simple as this course. There are things contained within this course that are probably, you look at them and you go, wow, that's of good value. I see myself doing something with that in the future or using it. And then there are non-value added things. They just don't mean as much to you. And these things vary from consumer to consumer. Some people want their vehicles to have all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. Other people don't want to pay for that at all because they don't need it, they don't want it. It adds weight to the vehicle and it reduces the miles per gallon of the car. And so this idea of trying to get at where is the value proposition, where are the features and benefits, can we eliminate the non-value added activities, the things that waste time or that the consumer does not want. And so this whole idea of really focusing on value is one of the key cornerstones to marketing. So promotion, advertising, personal selling, sales promotion, publicity, public relations. It is thought that we were in the production area, and then maybe we were in the marketing era. Certainly for a while in the late 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, we were in the mass marketing era, because if you wanted to really reach people, you tended to do that with television and reaching into them during the nightly news. But it's thought now that mass marketing is starting to die, and maybe we are moving into the publicity and public relations mode. Social media is changing the game a bit, and because there is so much marketing and advertising, targeted at consumers, they're just drowning in it. They're awash in it. And so companies are looking for a different way to try to reach consumers. And so this may be sponsorships, it may be providing useful information in the places that consumers hang out. It may be ramping up your corporate social responsibility so that your image is better. So there's a lot happening here that is changing the way that we try to convince consumers of our company and our products' value and benefits. It's no longer the kind of thing where you just run television ads during the Super Bowl. The other way to think about this too is it may be that you do not rely on just a single promotional tool. There may be some ways that you do some mass marketing to create some brand awareness, but maybe some of the deeper, more meaningful communications take place on websites and blogs, at places where consumers gather. And there are times where you may have a push strategy. That is, if you're a manufacturer, where you try to organize some marketing communications to go to the wholesalers and the retailers to try to push your product into the channel. And there, at the same time, you may be advertising directly to end consumers to try to create a pull strategy. That is a strategy where consumers go into the store and they start asking for your products, which then puts pressure on the retailer to carry that product. And so you can have a multi-pronged promotional strategy going on all at once. I mentioned earlier that it can be very useful when you have customers to try to retain those customers and make them repeat customers. It's often much easier to do repeat business with the same customers because they already have a familiarity with you, and there's already a certain level of trust that is developed, assuming that you haven't betrayed or broken that trust. So one of the ways that you do that is you try to manage those customer relationships, and it's basically knowing your customers. If you've ever, I don't know, let's use your dentist. They have a bunch of your information in their computer system, probably where you work, what your hobbies are, your birthday, your pet's name, your spouse's name, all of this stuff, which let's say the dental hygienist then can use that information to know something about you when you come in, and then they can have a more personal conversation with you, which makes you feel emotionally better about being at the dentist. And so now you think that was a better experience, and so you stay with your care provider in this case because they have deepened their relationship with you. And that's part of one, it can just be being a nice and good person, but it can also be part of a customer relationship strategy that a company may deliberately deploy. So at the end of the chapter, there's some other ideas that are slipped in here. I'm a big fan of Seth Godin and what he's done with both tribes and marketing in that way, but permission marketing. I'm a big filter of stuff. I like to delete pretty much everything that comes my way. I try to pay very little attention to most marketing that comes my way, and I don't really engage in mass television or the news, quite frankly, because I find that those are pretty non-value added activities. There's an immense amount of fluff there and not a lot of depth, and so in order to be more productive in my life, I have to screen a bunch of that stuff out to get at the things that I really want to get at. And so permission marketing sort of recognizes that consumers are starting to behave that way, and you can't just get in their face and yell at them. You have to have permission to market to them. You have to provide some value initially so that they'll want to follow you, or that they'll want to hear the next thing that you have to say. And so that's changing. That's a change in the relationship, from I'm here to sell you something to we may have some things that are of value. Would you like to hear about those? Which is a much different kind of approach. So mass marketing, the interruption marketing, and then of course all of the stuff that's going on with social media. I don't know what's going to happen with social media. Malcolm Gladwell, the author of Blink and Outliers and The Tipping Point, he recently said that he thinks social media will be dead in 10 years, that it will just be a blip in the historical, in the historical business history, because there just is, the value there is just not all that great. And so it'll be interesting to see a lot of, of course, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of these companies, in order to be profitable, they have to monetize your usage. And so they really have to push more ads at you. And as they push more ads That creates more distraction. That causes you to use more time on their platform, which they're happy about, but it starts to suck up your time. And the number of posts from your friends and the important things that are going on in people's lives tends to diminish over time as as the novelty of the tool wears off. And so all of these things have caused Gladwell to think that, it'll go away at some point. It'll go the way of other things that were novelties. We'll see if that plays out or not, but it's an interesting idea. Product life cycles. This is a good idea. This is a way of thinking about innovation and new products. They're created. There's a series of early adopters that maybe will try out products. There'll be a late majority. They'll be the mainstream, and then there'll be the laggards. But a product will go through. It'll be introduced. It will start to grow. It will reach maturity, and then it will decline. The profits of the product tend to be higher as you get into the growth and maturity cycle. The profits are eroded during the decline time, and then in the initial part, the profits are not great because you have a lot of startup costs, R&D, and those types of things. Many companies will try and promote a skimming strategy in the introduction because it kind of aligns and makes sense. In the introduction of a product, you're trying to get the early adopters, the people who want all the new latest greatest kind of stuff. They're usually willing to pay more to have it, and so you price high to try to increase your profitability. Think about 4K televisions or QLED versus the 720 or 1080 televisions. If you want the latest and greatest, you pay 2 to 3 times what you can get just sort of an average television for. And that's by design, because the companies know that there's a certain segment of the consumer market that wants to get the new stuff, the latest greatest stuff. For whatever reason, it gives them a certain amount of emotional hit. They like the product offerings. They want to be on the cutting edge, and so they charge those consumers more. And then as growth ramps up, economies of scale and production ramps up, then prices decline, and a product can become more mainstream at that point. So this is an interesting cycle. It plays out over and over again, and it's good to know where products fit in this particular idea. The marketing environment, we're a big fan of environmental scans. We kind of did that, or this idea we just completed as we looked at the context in which business takes place, when we looked at, legal and economic and, social responsibility and all these different, these are all contextual things, the context in which business takes place. And so this diagram here is just really thinking about, constantly thinking about what is the environment in which your marketing is taking place. How competitive is the space? What's happening in the economy? Where are we at with politics and regulation? How does this fit socially and culturally? And then where are we at with the with technology in general? And so these are just different factors that you can think about as you think about the context of your marketing mix or your product offering, and how you're going to continue to add value to customers. Consumer behavior, wow, big idea. Imagine just applying the idea of psychology to people's consumption, and that's where we're at here. The way people behave is not always as predictable as we'd like, and is, as we're finding out more and more, it's not as rational as we would like. We used to think that everybody, or the majority of consumers, they identified their needs, they made sure those needs were rational, they evaluated everything properly, and then they arrived at a decision that optimized or maximized the value. What we find, however, is that there's a lot more going on in the human subconscious, and there's a lot more going on with the emotions, that consumers are not always behaving rationally. And then that shouldn't be a big surprise to you. I think we all know that from time to time we all behave irrationally, and we can certainly see a whole series of markets that don't make much rational sense. It's hard to rationalize the consumption of tobacco, for example, and yet a large number of people consume that product. But there's lots of evidence that the health benefits are very negative. The cost is incredibly high. There's a social cost also, and yet people continue to consume the product, even though rationally maybe they would prefer that they didn't even, but because we're not always all behaving rationally, and this is all of us. We all do this in different ways. And so this is what's going on in consumer behaviors. We're trying to really understand what's happening with the psychology of the consumer at a lot greater detail, and we're trying to get our product, quite honestly, or companies are trying to get their product to become an automatic or habitual purchase. And so many of us probably have products that we just go back to again and again and again, particular brand, particular company, because it has satisfied a particular need for us in the past, and because our lives are so incredibly busy, we can't be mindful for every single consumptive decision that we make, and so we just grab the same beverage that we've always grabbed, whatever it might be. And so consumer behavior is really looking at this idea of how consumers really behave and trying to get our product into the habituation process so that we can get a lot of repeat sales. Psychological influences, motivations, perceptions, learning, attitudes, people's personalities. So these are all psychological traits or psychological attributes that are part of the consumer behavior process. And we may try to design our marketing mix or our marketing communications to alter one of these or to touch one of these in just the right way so that we can trigger consumption. Besides psychological influences, there's a variety of social influences on consumers, and so part of understanding consumers is also their socioeconomic status, the groups they belong to, who they look up to, maybe political references, their family group, what culture they're from or belong to, and maybe even besides all of these categories and where they're at in these categories, possibly even where they aspire to be. And so we may look at all of these factors also as we try to create customer value and communicate that value. So that's a lot of information in this chapter. I apologize for my phone going off again in the middle of it, but I guess that's technology. Thanks for joining us. We will add chapter 10 in the next video, which will pick up on more marketing ideas. I guess if there was one takeaway here, for me personally, it would be that marketing is not advertising. Advertising is that subcomponent. The real battle is won by creating superior value for the consumer and then being able to articulate that value correctly so that consumers are aware that you're creating all of that value for them. And when you do that, it makes business much, much easier. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch up in the next chapter.